The Australian government cannot even build a house for $43 billion. Not one single solitary house. In his time as Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese has now announced $43 billion in funding for housing. But not one single solitary house will ever be built by the government. Yes, some houses will be built with that $43 billion, although not nearly as many as that much money should pay for. It is a government program after all, so efficiency and value for money will of course be abysmal, that's a given. But my point today is that of those paltry few houses which will be built with this stupendous sum of money, none of them will be built by the government, and the end result of all that money will be fewer houses, not more. Every house built with that $43 billion will be built by builders, not the government. And that may sound like I'm playing semantic games, but stick with me because this is a vital concept to understand. And it drives a stake through the heart of the government lie that it is helping with the housing crisis. My name's Topher Field, this is the Topher Project, and I help busy people like you to cut through the lies and the spin and to make sense of the nonsense that surrounds us. Anthony Albanese has been returned as Australian Prime Minister, and so he is going to continue to spend lots of our money to fix the housing crisis. He's already promised $33 billion to an array of different programs intended to deliver tens of thousands of homes, particularly lower-cost homes and houses allocated to social housing. Albanese is, of course, famously proud of the fact that he once lived in social housing himself, and it would appear that he wants all Australians to enjoy the privilege of being dependent on the government for our shelter as well. So prior to the election, he'd already promised $33 billion of our dollars for houses, well, for us, but he was so keen to leverage the housing affordability crisis as an election-winning issue that he promised to spend a further $10 billion of our dollars on even more houses for us. And surely, given that he's taken $43 billion off us and is spending it on us, then that must mean the problem is solved, right? Well, no, of course not. No amount of government spending can ever fix the problem of housing affordability. In fact, the opposite is true. The more the government spends on housing, the worse this crisis will become. And that is baked into the cake. That is inherent. Because government involvement distorts and twists the free market, including the housing market, in ways which make it less efficient. And efficiency is just an economist's wanky way of saying you need to put more money in to get less of a result out whenever the government is involved. You see, the lack of housing in Australia is not caused by a lack of money being spent on housing. In fact, Australians are lining up to buy every single square inch of land that is released all over the country, with the partial exception of Victoria, which I'll come to in a minute. I'm speaking to developers and investors all over Australia, and it is not uncommon for me to hear of buyers flipping blocks of land for tens of thousands of dollars in profit before they've even been built on. Such is the demand for land. Australians are literally throwing money at housing right now. So if a lack of money isn't the problem, then how is government money, which comes from us, the very people who are already enthusiastically spending a fortune on houses, how is more money going to fix it? The answer is, it isn't. Because housing isn't unaffordable because people lack the money, it's unaffordable because of the lack of supply and because what little supply there is massively overpriced because of government regulations. Now, I've already covered the way in which things like efficiency standards and accessibility requirements add tens of thousands of dollars in costs to every new build, whilst stamp duty, along with a myriad of government reports and tests and approvals and requirements, combine to add hundreds of thousands of dollars in unproductive costs to every new build. But even there, that's still only part of the story. The government, through zoning, planning and restricted land release, intentionally create a Hunger Games-style perpetual shortage of land to build on. But even still, that's still not the full story. Because if this $43 billion does actually get used to build actual houses, and I'm skeptical, but let's entertain the fantasy for a moment, then all it's going to do is create a shortage of builders. Because the government is not going to build these houses. Albanese is not going to be up on the roof trusses wielding a nail gun, and nor will any of the other career bureaucrats. All they will do is wave excessive amounts of money under the noses of our already scarce tradies and builders and drag them away from the more efficient private sector, where they are busy meeting the needs of their clients, to the less efficient public sector, where they can make a small fortune keeping bureaucrats happy, irrespective of whether they're building what Australians actually need or want. We are watching exactly this phenomenon play out in Victoria right now, where builders are particularly hard to come by thanks to the obscene salaries offered to anyone working on the infamously corrupt big build projects funded by Victorian taxpayers. From rail lines and tunnels to the Westgate Freeway and countless other government construction sites, CFMEU members are paid six-figure salaries to operate digging machines. Why would anyone work in private housing construction in the blazing sun and the rain when they can work a machine or lean on a shovel on a union site in the city for twice the money? Remember, when you're spending your own money on something for yourself, you're worried about both the cost and the result. But if you're spending someone else's money, well, then you're not really worried about the cost. And if you're spending it on someone else, well, you're not really worried about the result either. So the government, which is spending other people's money on projects which aren't for them, only care about looking good, not doing good. So they throw obscene amounts of money at the unions to keep peace on the construction sites because why not? It's not their money. But in the process, they suck up the valuable workforce and drive up construction costs and cause delays for private sector home builders, the very home builders and home owners that the government are supposedly spending these billions to help. So the people who do care about costs and about results in the private sector, well, they can't get land. And if they can get land, they can't get builders because the government, which doesn't care about costs or about results, has stolen their money and is spending it outbidding them to build projects that have dubious value in the end. That was the state of play before Albanese promised to add a total of another $43 billion to the problem. Now, he says he's helping because that'll be used to help build houses. But who are they paying? They're paying the same private sector builders who are already hard to find for any private land owner. So already we can see that any homes built with this $43 billion slush fund will not be additional homes. These homes will be built instead of the ones that would have been built by private owners. But now they won't be, because those private owners can't find a builder, or if they can, they can't afford them anymore. But that's still only the beginning, because this is government money, so we know that their costs will blow out, their deadlines will be ignored. Some builders will take advantage of the easy money, but even the builders that want to do the right thing have to add huge margins to everything they do with the government, just to protect themselves against the bureaucratic ineptitude and inefficiency that is inherent to any government-funded project. So now, we're taking money and labour which could have built houses efficiently in the private sector, and instead we're using those inefficiently in the public sector, and then we're going to wonder why, with all of this additional government spending, how come the cost of housing hasn't gone down? And why has the cost of construction gone up? But do you know what's worse than being led by a man so stupid that this is his idea of helping? It's that we are a population so stupid that we fell for it and we voted for it. Not that Dutton would have been any better. I'm no apologist for the Liberal Party. But I did do a video comparing their respective plans for housing, and Dutton's plan was less bad, simply because his plan included some reforms to building codes and to minimum standards that would have actually reduced the cost of construction and made land more available. It was still a bad plan, but it was way less bad than the one that we're getting now under Albanese. As it is, we've given the nod of approval to the guy who's going to spend $43 billion of our dollars not building a single additional house over and above what would have been built if he'd done nothing. In fact, almost certainly we will end up with fewer houses. And we'll be driving up the cost of construction even further by sucking up the limited supply of builders and putting them to work on inefficient government builds. If I were a more cynical political observer, I'd suggest that this is all on purpose. But I don't actually think it is. I think it's worse than that. I think that this is the best they can do. This is them operating at the limits of their intellectual capacity. And sadly, this is Australia voting at the limit of ours. Now, I'm not a market watcher and I'm certainly not an investment advisor, but in my personal opinion, we are not going to see a collapse in housing values anytime soon. Housing is not likely to become more affordable. The rate of immigration, combined with ongoing restrictions on land supply, now with the addition of builders becoming even harder to find than ever before and more expensive, is going to ensure that this housing crisis that we are in only gets worse. Now, that may be good news for anyone that already owns real estate, but it's terrible news for the people that these politicians like Albanese are saying they're spending this $43 billion Homes for Australia money to help. $43 billion, either stolen from taxpayers or printed out of thin air and adding to inflation, and not one single additional home above what would have been built. Only a politician could be that dumb. And when that plan fails, you can be sure that they will just announce more of what's not working, more of our money to fix what they broke in the first place. If you don't laugh, you'll cry. My name's Topher Field. This is the Topher Project, and I help busy people like you to keep up with the world as it changes around us and to see through the spin that we're being fed in the mainstream media. I am 100% viewer supported, and you can help me to keep on the air by buying my books and my merch from goodpeoplebreakbadlaws.com. Thanks for watching to the end. Please like, comment, subscribe, check out this recommended video, and as always, stay free.